The first question you might want to ask is why Frank Stone did what he did and why was he evil? The answer to that is technically he wasn't evil. How did Dr. Augustine Lieber convince Frank Stone to hurt people and want to ritualistically sacrifice a baby to the entity? When first exploring Augustine's manor, there are some items of major significance. There's a Tales of Gilgamesh book with notes describing how Gilgamesh saw past the demon's pleas for mercy and slayed it because only a violent demonstration would stir the watching gods. There is no room for mercy in the pursuit of glory. The heavens will not open for a champion that shows restraint. Note that the notes are for Norman, which is Frank Stone's middle name, and something his grandmother called him. Note the use of the word champion when talking of the heavens opening up, and champion being Frank Stone's killer name. Note how the notes talk about a demon. There's a hidden meanings book with a secret passage describing how blood being shed through violence is how to draw the gaze of a higher reality or higher world, and doing so could permit transport between worlds while still having your life in exchange for sacrificing others. The last piece to tie this together is Frank Stone's journal, which is notably found where the victim's prison was. In his journal, Frank describes how he hasn't heard from Augustine, despite sacrificing 5 people. Frank has nightmares of a forest and people screaming within it, which stirs down in him because if they are evil, like the demon being shown no mercy by Gilgamesh, then why do the people scream? In the last paragraph of the first page, Frank has a moment of clarity and wonders to himself, how is he the one who knows what evil is? Then he doubles down and ponders maybe destroying the entire town's population is the right thing to do. Instead, Frank chooses to just wait to receive a sign. 2 months later is when Augustine comes back to Frank and tells him she is happy. Augustine now tells Frank the root of evil in the town is the Cedar Steel Mill founder's progeny. Frank details how he will use the mill's equipment to forge tools that will destroy the founder's legacy to cleanse the town of evil. Frank notes that when this is done is when he can reach to the other side and see what it is to be eternal, to be divine, to be a champion of a higher world through this divinity. This is when every piece of debt Frank had before it dissipated. This journal entry is the beginning of 1963, the year Frank Stone was stopped by Sam Green. Frank Stone became a serial killer because his difficult upbringing caused his delusions of grandeur, which Augustine Lieber saw in him and manipulated and exploited so that Frank Stone could be the vessel and Augustine the traveler. Frank Stone was a mentally ill man who turned into a mission archetype serial killer through a genuinely evil person's lies. Frank Stone was told he would be ridding Cedar Hills of evil, and this would in turn grant him divine favor, when the reality was he was being used to bring an evil god that would destroy his world because his accomplice was a sycophant who wanted to be the evil god's servant. There's some other questions that are related to Frank Stone. One is, when he becomes a spirit, why does he look the way he does? In 1963, when Frank Stone died, he fell onto a piece of rebar that impaled his jaw and ripped it off, which mirrored the mask he wore. This is the reason his spirit has an open mouth and chest. How come there are people inside his body? There are people inside his body because he uses the essence and parts of people to create sections in the steel mill, such as the furnace chamber where he died, for his grand design. You can see a mural of it too. If you remember, it looks like faces are etched into the ground. Frank Stone probably didn't know that these essences and parts of other people would coalesce to bring his spirit out in 1980. This is the best presumption. There's not a definitive answer to this question. One thing people might not realize is that the Frank Stone in the game isn't really the Frank Stone from 1963 and 1980. The Frank Stone from 1963 was human and died. The Frank Stone from 1980 was his spirit who was then trapped. When Frank Stone was captured and trapped in the camera, his existence was transferred into the Murder Mill film roll, which was divided into 3 parts. If you remember, the Murder Mill film is using pieces of film from at least 3 different worlds, so the Frank Stone in 2024 is the collection of Frank Stone's essence from 3 different worlds combined into one being. The other question you might have is, why is it called the casting of Frank Stone? One definition of casting is a liquid or material being poured into a mold which then solidifies. The solid product is the casting. The material being poured is the essences and parts of the victims, while the mold is Frank Stone himself. The solid product?